What's up, listeners of KZPT Audio? This is me, Carl, giving you a bit of a rundown of today's episode, which is actually my very first interview done on me through Liam O'Donnell's Braintainment podcast. It's an amazing podcast. He gets a lot of good people on. He's got people from coaches, AFL, even, gold medalists, Commonwealth Games, all that sort of stuff. He's an incredible dude. He knows what he's talking about. And, he basically got me on to talk about some of the more intricate details of food, supplementation, things like that, to really live a happy and healthy life. And yeah, it's a really good listen for anyone who's struggling a little bit during these times. It's very COVID related. One of the things that I found of myself when I'm doing interviews is that it's actually a lot harder than giving the interviews, because when someone asks you a question, you really have to think about how it affects each individual person. Giving a blanket statement is extremely hard, with a lot of these topics. So I try really hard to answer it in a way that gives people the power to make their own decisions. It's not me telling people that this is the exact way to eat, to train, to do this, to do that. It's really about helping people understand the science or the knowledge behind why we do things, and then finding out what's right or wrong for you. So I'm about to give this a little re-listen. This was done about a month ago now, and I haven't really listened to it since. So I'm about to give it myself a second listen. And yeah, hope you guys can join me on a walk. I've got my mask on right now, ready to go for a walk. And yeah, let me know what you think. Please subscribe and follow Liam O'Donnell's podcast. It's really, really fun, really interesting. And yeah, hope you enjoy. Please let me know what you think. Thanks, guys. Listen up.
G'day listeners, welcome to the Braintainment podcast. This show is an interesting mix between pop culture and personal development, with a very wide range of guests that come on the show for a chat from the sports space, philosophy, health and fitness, entertainment, and everything in between. The idea is to entertain or to educate you guys, and hopefully sometimes both, either through just myself or with the guests that come on the show, as we explore different ideas and concepts and have some really interesting conversations. The mission with the Braintainment podcast is to raise $1 million, and that all starts with building an audience and a platform. So thank you for tuning in. Our goal is to raise $1 million towards brain injury recovery and research. So if you enjoy the show, please share it with your friends and family, and be sure to subscribe. With that said, strap in and enjoy this episode. Okay, welcome back to the podcast. Today we're chatting with PT Karl Zuidema, and we're going to be chatting all things personal training, fitness, nutrition, mindset, and mental health, and how it all relates, as well as what you need to know to optimize your body and your mind as a result, and what you can do at home right now, particularly with everything going on amidst the COVID madness. Now, I've worked with Karl personally, and he knows his stuff. He's experienced. He's helped his clients achieve some pretty remarkable results, and it's pretty evident every time you chat with him that he bloody loves what he does. So I think you're going to love this episode and learn a lot on how you can perhaps optimize your body and your mindset and mental health as a result. So with that said, Karl, welcome, mate. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much, man. It's an absolute pleasure to be on here. And I have to say, I love one of the words that you used just there, optimizing your health and your body. That's really what I'm all about. And it's a different road for everybody, but yeah, optimizing and just trying to get the most from the least is really what I'm trying to get out of everyone. So thanks for having me, man.
I love that, mate, and I couldn't agree more. And like I kind of touched on there and alluded to, certainly in our conversations, you're always really passionate, you know your stuff, and there's so many ways to go about optimizing. We'll cover off as much as we can in this short chat, but hopefully it points people in the right direction anyway. So I'm excited to dive in and really add some value here and have obviously a lot of fun along the way. Mate, where I want to start is the link between exercise and mental health. I think just amidst everything going on right now, it's arguably the hottest commodity is our mental well-being. And there's a number of ways to go about improving that and keeping that sound, but exercise and diet, of course, is an easy way. So could you maybe just touch on the link between moving your body and eating right, and the impact that has on our mental health.
Yeah, man, for sure. Well, look, like the way that I like to look at it is exercise and nutrition in general should really be more to improve your quality of life. If you're always looking at it from an aspect of just trying to improve the way that you look, it can be pretty hard because it's a long journey and you can get lost along the way pretty easily. So when you're training and when you're eating and when you're thinking about all these things, how you feel should really play a big role into that, because the better your mental health and the better you feel about the things that you're doing in the gym, at home, whatever it is that you're doing, the better you feel about it, the more likely you're going to be able to do it long term. So taking care of that mental health side of things and actually doing your exercise and nutrition with that in mind will allow you to do this for years on end. And that's why when I'm working with people, I'm not really dogmatic about certain training styles. I don't think that every single person I know should be lifting weights. I don't think every single person I work with should do a bunch of cardio or eat only chicken breast. It's really about finding what that end goal is for you, and it's about finding a way that we can do this nonstop and we can do this again and again over time. So I think deliberate movement and actually moving with purpose and deciding to yourself and actually making that a part of your day can really, really help. And I don't know about anyone else, but I can even feel it now, just not having the gym for myself. But obviously there's all sorts of other ways to exercise, but just not having that thing that makes me feel, for lack of a better word, normal. And yeah, just trying to find my sort of middle place and find sort of that happy place without exercise is actually quite tough. And from the conversations that I'm having with a lot of my clients, it's this funny, like, the first couple of weeks you feel okay and you feel like, oh, you know what, it's everything's going to be fine. I'm just gonna sort of wait it out and I'm not going to let this stop me and I'll get straight back on it. But the longer this lockdown that has been drawn out, I think the lower the morale is for everybody, which is kind of hard.
I suppose it makes it hard to break that cycle then too. We're creatures of habit. So if you get stuck into, like you kind of touched on there, waiting it out, the danger in that is you become complacent, and then trying to get going is really tough. And I know for myself, like you kind of touched on there as well, part of the appeal of working out and trying to keep fit and healthy is the aesthetics. I'd be lying if I said I don't like to look good, and I'm sure people listening can relate in some way. But mate, I got to tell you, it's almost the biggest motivator. That it's how I feel about myself. It is the mental health side of things, and the challenge with everything happening right now, and the lack of access to gyms, etc. Even just with the limited time frames you can spend outdoors exercising at this moment in time, does make it tough. So unless you're monitoring and being very aware of, doing something, then it can be a slippery slope. So I think that's kind of why I wanted to get you on, and is to make sure people don't fall into that cycle.
Yeah, man, exactly. And I'm finding it within myself. The thing that it's funny because we need to actually determine what exercise is. And the way that I look at exercise, because I've worked with a lot of people that say, like, I don't do exercise, I don't move, I don't lift, I don't do anything. But the way that I look at exercise is just deliberate movement, and that key word there, which is deliberate. And it's when you're at home and obviously we're working from home, we're sitting exponentially more than probably ever before. Deliberate movement and exercise is just becoming more important. And I think if you get too caught up on what it is that you should be doing and what the best thing is to do, sometimes you can get that paralysis by analysis, and you're thinking so much about it that you just end up not doing much at all. And that's when a lot of problems start to arise. And what started off as like a 2 week, 3 week, 6 week hiatus of and just not doing the things that you should be doing turns into 6 months, 12 months, half your lifetime, and then it's almost too late to look back.
Yeah, dude, that is huge. That intention, that deliberate practice, like you touched on, I think is really important. So then for people that are listening, that are at home, maybe they have let their routine lapse, or potentially they might not have even had one prior to prior to the lockdown, where do they start? So we'll talk about some exercise with equipment in a sec, but I'd love to know some examples or some ideas for people that that they can utilize to work out at home that don't require equipment. Is there any sort of best practices that you have?
Yeah, for sure. So look, it's funny because my recommendations have been changing over the weeks as the lockdown here in Victoria gets stricter and stricter. So before it used to be like there are plenty of parks that you can go to that have some equipment, and walking to a park that's close by, and then doing just a small resistance training little circuit with things like the things that everybody knows. It's your push-ups, it's your squats, it's your rows and things like that, is always going to be a really good place to start. But the longer that we stay in this and the more restrictions that come on, it does get harder, and it's going to be very, very tough for people if you haven't already invested in some equipment to I guess, change your body dramatically during this time. I would argue that shouldn't really be the end result for you right now. And like you talked about at the very beginning, your exercise right now should determine your mental health, and you should be asking yourself, what makes you feel good. If you're in a rut right now and you're struggling to find ideas for exercise or just the motivation in general, you need to ask yourself why are you training in the first place? What actually makes you feel good? For me, for example, when it comes to exercise, I've never been a massive fan of like running. I'm a pretty heavy guy. I've played basketball. That was always my running. But other than that, doing that high intensity cardio or just body weight running or that style of thing is never been my forte. But the longer that we're missing out on these things, what I'm addicted to and what I love about exercise is the way that you feel after. I think if you get too attached to specific exercises, and you're always just worrying about the same ones, and even if it doesn't feel right or practical at the time, but you're constantly trying to push it, sometimes it can have an adverse effect. So for people, what I would recommend now is really going back to your roots and looking at what got you excited in the first place. If you are the kind of person that really enjoys weight training and that's been your specific type of training for quite some time, then you can't go wrong with the basics when it comes to push-ups, when it comes to squats, using any sort of weights that you can from home to progress it. But when you are doing body weight exercises and workouts, one of the things that I would definitely keep in consideration while you're doing it is you have to work hard. Your body has to feel like it's done something that it wasn't able to do before. So, training close to failure, training to failure all the time isn't really, I would say, the best practice, but getting close to and actually pushing your limits, I think, is in whatever it is that you do, whether it is how many push-ups you can do in a minute, whether it's how many push-ups you can do in total, whether it's how fast you can run a kilometer. Making these little goals for yourself is really what we're looking for, and really what's going to progress you long term. And even though a lot of the equipment that we were using and a lot of the things you'd be used to is now scrapped for some people obviously a little bit luckier in other states and countries, but you need to be obsessed with progression. You need to be obsessed with getting better in whatever it is. Like I said, the push-ups, squats, all of those things, they all matter.
Mate, that's awesome. Let's talk about that actually. So I just want to unpack that a little bit. So I always say to people, progress equals happiness. And I actually stole that from Tony Robbins. It applies to all areas of life, right? So I love that you kind of led us into that part of the conversation. So where should people start, I suppose? So and how important, I guess what I want to ask is, how important is it to have specific tangible goals that you're working towards to constantly get better, constantly work towards that fatigue level, like you mentioned, and then increase your baseline almost, versus just having this general idea of, I want to get fit or I want to get healthy, that is kind of esoteric and it's hard to pinpoint exactly what that means. So how important is it to have those specific steps and goals that you're working towards?
Well, yeah, man. I think it's everything. I think understanding where you're coming from and what you actually want to achieve from the things that you're doing is everything in life. Because if someone let's take you for example, right? So you've been training for quite a while. We did it together. I've seen the way that you lift. You're actually, it's quite impressive. Now, do you do you want to be 110 kilos of just lean, hard mass, as bulky as you can, as shredded as you can? Would you say that's your end goal?
I to an extent, yeah, I want to be big and strong, but I want to look ripped.
Yeah, good.
So I want to be, I want to, I feel like I'm too lean, but I don't want to lose my aesthetic, that athletic look as well.
Of course. So taking you into account, if you right now, for someone who's looking to put on a little bit of size still, but doesn't want to just blow out altogether, if you just
Yeah,
have that mentality of I just want to stay fit, and you're just doing things just to keep you occupied, then
yeah,
very unlikely that's going to happen. There needs to be a hierarchy of things that are in place for you, so that you're doing the things that are most important to your goal always, and then doing the things that you enjoy um, on the outside of that. But there needs to be some sort of structure for you to understand. There's a lot of people out there that don't really don't really enjoy exercise. It's that simple. It's a really big line between people, because there's someone like myself where, in most cases, if I go longer than 2 to 3 days without doing some sort of weight training, I start to not really feel myself. I start to feel
mm,
really lazy, lethargic. I want to move less. Like, the longer I let this roll out, I feel worse and worse. So for me, it's just this constant keeping up appearances, almost, so that I feel normal to myself. But there's a lot of people that don't feel that way. And for someone like that, I would say it's less important to do these things that we're going to talk about later on to actually optimize, right? And actually get the most out of it. If you don't enjoy it and you're doing it because you know it's a health factor to you, and you know that you just want to do it because you think it's the right thing to do for your health, then you got to follow very different set of guidelines to someone who wants to either lose as much weight as possible or put on as much muscle as possible. There's so many different routes, and there's not really a starting point that you can just sort of generalize, because everyone should be looking for something different out of their exercise and their training, and their nutrition for that matter. um, you need to understand with yourself, what do you really want to get out of it? Do you want to be massive? Do you want to be shredded? Do you want to do something in between? Do you just want to stay fit? And then you need to work with someone, or do your own research, which I'm super for, and actually start to create find out what actually is going to get you there and get you to those goals, and then work backwards.
yeah, I love that. It's such a cliche analogy, but if you want to if you want to get from A to B, you need to know where A is and you need to know where B is, right? So part of that is knowing where you're at right now. And I know we might touch on it a little bit later, but I'm sure you do some sort of assessment with your clients when they first come to see you. But you need to have that North Star, that B point, so that you can actually customize a strategy accordingly, right? So just on that, when you are working with clients, are you identifying their goals so that you can then tailor a very specific plan of attack? Is that something that people should take away listening to this? That, hey, your strategy needs to be depending on what your goal is, whether it is to feel good or to lose weight or to gain weight. Is that kind of your approach?
Yeah, exactly. For example, if I get someone that comes in and they turn around to me and they say, I am 100% committed. I've been training already for 3 to 4 years, and now I've decided I really want to step it up. I want to get as strong as possible. I want to be really muscly. Like, I've got, they already have the dedication. They already have that discipline in actually getting into the gym, because I find that's one of the hardest parts of it. If they've already got those things, then from there, it's really about just optimizing every session and optimizing every meal, so that that's all we have to worry about. But if I'm going to be completely honest with you, there's not as many of those people as you'd think. A lot of the time, what needs to be factored into these is all the other lifestyle factors that no one really takes into consideration. You know, what time of day do you work? How many days a week do you actually want to train? Because for someone, there's a lot of people that just enjoy, they like doing, say, their Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then they don't really want to do anything else. Now, if someone comes in and I give them a 5-day program, and I've specifically programmed for 5 days of training, but they only want to do 3, and then they end up missing 1 to 2 sessions every single week, you know, that's not ideal. That's not optimal. I would much rather, from my end, write a 3-day program for that person, even though they're not going to be coming into the gym as much, but I know that they're going to be doing all the things that they need to, rather than shooting for the stars and, you know, saying, I'll come in every single day this week, and then we fall short, you know, 2-3 weeks in. What people need to remember is that this is a long game. If you're actually trying to change your physique and you're trying to change the way your body looks, you need to be in this mindset, and you need to be in this run for, at the very minimum, you know, 3 months to 6 months. That's really how long it's going to take. And I think impatience and, you know, people just getting really, really impatient on the results can sometimes really stop that as well.
Yeah, we're in an instant gratification world, aren't we? So it can be tough to condition that mindset if people don't already have it. I know I struggle with it at times. You know, you really do have to play the long game, particularly if you've got some big goals. Mate, let's talk about diet a little bit. So what's the balance between training, so moving your body, and diet? Like, is one more important than the other? Do they sort of work hand in hand? Like, what's your thought process around that?
Yeah, man, this is one where it took a long time of being on the job and working with bodies to really understand just how important the diet is. If I take you back a few years, so I've been personal training now, and coaching others to get their bodies for about 7 years now. And at the start, all I really focused on was the training. You know, I would just come in, I would tell them what they're going to be doing, and that was pretty much the bulk of it. And what I started to realize was 3 months went past, 6 months went past, 12 months went past, and I wasn't seeing a massive change in people. I wasn't really, you know, they felt good, you know, they felt fitter, and, you know, they could feel their muscles, and they were, for lack of a better word, happy, because, you know, they were feeling good about themselves, because I think that's what training does for people. It makes you feel good, you know, it makes you want to look in the mirror and actually check on your progress, which I think is so important. But were they losing weight? No. Were they getting leaner? Were they actually getting closer to the goal that they set out at the very start? I would have to say no. And it wasn't until I actually started to compete in natural bodybuilding, and I actually decided, you know what? I've never actually had a six pack. You know, I've always been pretty heavy. I was very good at putting on muscle. It just happened pretty naturally. But yeah, I never saw my abs. I couldn't get it. And that's when I hired another trainer for myself and decided I'm going to compete. And during that time, what I realized was my training, there wasn't really anything wrong with my training. You know, I didn't change that all too much. It was a little bit more structured, but what really got the abs out was that consistent diet. So I dieted for uh, it was about 24 weeks in total. And in that 24 weeks, which turns out to be is that 6 months? Yeah, just under 6 months. What I found out in that time was it's all diet. You know, if you're really looking to change your physique, it starts with the food, because the food is what's going to decide whether you have enough energy to put on muscle or you don't have enough energy in the system, and it's going to make you take away from your body fat. So if you really are obsessed about being a certain number on the scale, so if you want to weigh a certain weight, or you want to put on lean tissue, you must understand the food. You must understand protein, you must understand carbohydrates, and you must understand fats and the ratios of those to get the most out of it. Because I've seen people who can, by the stretch of it, be eating clean, right? And I think one of the biggest misconceptions with the diet is that eating healthy will therefore make you lose weight. And as sad as it is, it's just not the case. You need to be eating in a calorie deficit. There needs to be an energy balance within your body to actually make weight loss or weight gain happen. And if you don't understand those mechanisms, you're going to have a very hard time. And some people have gotten the results without that, but it's basically luck. You know, if you don't actually know how much you're eating and you don't actually know the foods that you're putting into you, you're leaving it into the hands of God. And that's fine for some people. Like I said, for people who aren't 100% love the gym and love and dedicated to it, I would argue that that's the best way to go, because counting calories and getting into that science side of things can be a lot for someone who doesn't really enjoy it. So I'm not saying it's impossible to get results without understanding your nutrition. But if you want to be in control of your body weight and you actually want to be in control of how you look and feel on a day-to-day basis, understanding calories, your proteins, your carbs, and your fats, and how they work inside your body and how much you as an individual need of those things is going to be the most valuable information you could find out for yourself. And it's pretty easy too. I'd be happy to go through a little bit here to give some
let's
formulas
dive
to
into it. So
people.
you touched the macros there. Yeah, well, let's dive into that. So is there like a set percentage or ratio for those macros you mentioned? Does it depend on the goals? Like, let's dive into that. I'd love to, because I'm curious myself.
Awesome. Yeah, man. So this is where it really becomes a bit more of an art form, and people who get diets either prescribed to them, they go to a nutritionist or off their personal trainer or just online. This is where, you know, the art form comes behind diet planning. And I think it's something that I really enjoy about it. So when it comes to calories, as we know, the Australian standard at the moment is around a 2,000 calorie diet, and for the most part, I like that. I like starting at around 2,000, whether you're male or female, to actually see what your body does, because you know everybody's different depending on your height, your weight, your age. The amount of calories and the amount of energy that you need as a human to function, to live, and to move and breathe is going to be different for everybody. For example, you're a tall dude, so and we've spoken about it before. You can eat quite a lot, right? If I was to eat,
Dude, I had like 4,000 calories, and I'm so bloody lean still.
that's what I mean, man. So you know, your body type can handle that amount. Whereas if I was to eat that same amount of food, I would put on weight a lot quicker, and I just don't hold it quite as well. So it's about understanding the person and understanding their lifestyle all the way up into adulthood, because epigenetics do play a role in this as well, and that's things that happen to you from a child, that happen to you like as a kid, or even in the womb, you know, as your parents. All these things start to play a massive role. So I always start at around anywhere between 1,700 to 2,200 calories, and just sticking it right there. There's no right answer on where you start, because like we spoke about before, what you're trying to find is a baseline. You're trying to find that number where if you can track all your food and put into a little calculator, like MyFitnessPal, or there's a couple of other great ones on online or in an app store. If you can find a way where you are consistently eating the exact same amount of calories, doesn't necessarily have to be the same amount of or the same foods that you're eating, but it does make it easier, because the second you start to change food from day to day, the calories don't really match up. It's really hard to get it just right unless you become really, really, really fanatic about counting your calories. But we'll keep going. So 2,000, anywhere between 1,700 to 2,200 calories is where you want to start. Now, you need to do this for, I like to try and get people to hold it for at least a week. You know, you want to try and get about a week's worth of data from how much you're eating and what it does to the scales, because day to day, your weight will fluctuate. So water will make you fluctuate quite a bit. So you want to get like a full week's amount, and then you want to start to taking the average of those 7 days of your weights. So you weigh yourself Monday, you're 90 kilos. You weigh yourself on Tuesday, you're 89.7. Wednesday, 89.3, 89.8. And you keep going like this. And what you're going to start to see is, depending on the amount of calories that you're eating, it's going to show up and show you just how much weight you can lose with that. Now, once you have this number, weight loss and weight gain becomes pretty easy for quite some time, for at least 3 months to 6 months, until you start to maybe plateau a little bit, depending. But for the most part, this number is super important to get, because as a coach, as someone who just trains normally, it gives you the freedom to not have to sit on a strict diet, because there's been a lot of studies that have shown that whether you're eating perfectly clean, all organic, all non-sugar, non-refined, simple carbohydrates, and versus a flexible diet where your food changes. You're allowed to have macas every now and again. You're allowed to do this every now and again, as long as your calories stay relatively constant. They've shown no difference in weight loss. So, or weight loss or weight gain. So if that's your main goal and you just want to lose a little bit of weight, then take the time to understand that and actually follow a certain amount of calories for a period of time and see what it does to you. Because if you're putting on weight, if you're doing this diet and your weight is increasing as you go, then you need to eat less, right? It's a very simple formula, and then recalculate how many calories that is, and then wait for the scales to come down. And as soon as you start to see the scales consistently drop and start to do their thing, that's when you found the number that's going to work for you. And then that's the number you want to stick to as often as possible. The more days you can get that calorie amount, the more weight you're going to lose over time.
I love that. Mate, pretty simple formula for people to adhere to.
Yeah,
I actually found myself, when I was trying to put on weight, I sort of joked before, but I do consume a lot of calories every day, and I love that you mentioned epigenetics. So, look, without sort of derailing too much, like for someone like myself, I know people listening potentially might relate to some extent. We've all got a history, we've all got a past, and for me, I had a really nasty head injury 5-6 years ago, and as a result, I struggle with anxiety pretty badly from time to time, and I'm often in that fight or flight, which, funnily enough, just looking back in hindsight, is probably burning a lot of calories. Like just my brain is, I think the brain takes a lot of energy from memory. So I'm sort of burning through calories, probably unknowingly. When on paper, I'm not necessarily moving that much throughout the day, but I'm needing those calories. But anyway, when I intentionally increased that calorie count, and I was counting them, I did actually start to put on some size. And so it's a pretty simple formula to follow. It's a matter of just, I suppose, the next variable is just having the discipline to do it, right?
Absolutely, man. It's the discipline of it all. And before I go into that, I just want to mention a little fun fact. Now, when I was talking about your body burning calories and using calories for energy, the funny thing about it is only about, it's something between 10 and 20% of the calories you burn each day is from your actual exercise. If you do a weight training session, or cardio is obviously a little bit more, but the exercise aspect of it is really not that much when it comes to, how many calories you're using in a day. Where it really sits is actually in the what's called NEAT. It's non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So it's while you're sitting down and bouncing your leg up and down. It's while you're twiddling your fingers. It's while you're just walking from the couch to the fridge. That over a 24-hour period actually burns the most amount of calories. Now, for someone who's in a fight or flight mode a lot of the time, and for people that are super anxious, you'll find that you're doing those things actually a lot more, and it can play a massive role into how much weight you can gain or lose, because you'll find that you'll constantly fiddle, and you'll do things and you'll just be really agitated, and that can take up to 50% of the calories you burn, and it can actually become quite hard to maintain or manage your weight.
Fuck, dude, that's awesome. So you blow my mind. So what was that acronym you mentioned? I'm just going to scribble this down for myself. It was NEAT or something?
Yeah, so it's called NEAT. It's non-exercise activity thermogenesis.
Yeah.
And that's, so it's basically how many...
Thermogenesis?
Thermogenesis.
Okay, NEAT, gotcha.
Yeah, so...
that is really cool.
Yeah, it's really incredible. And so what they taught me while I was prepping was, and prepping for the bodybuilding show, was that's usually because what happens to people once you've been really, really strict dieting. There's not a lot of people I know that get to this point, but basically you've been dieting for 3 months, 4 months, nonstop, virtually no cheat days. And what starts to happen is that even though you're eating less and you're potentially doing the same amount of exercise, your weight loss just stalls and you can't get it to move. And you're like, what the hell is happening? You think it's going against nature because, like I said, it's just a formula. It's just calories in versus calories out. And what the studies have shown over time is it's because when you're dieting for that long, you get what's called diet fatigue. And once you start experiencing diet fatigue, you realize you start to move less, you start to talk slower, you start to do all these little things very differently to preserve energy, and you're doing this almost subconsciously. And what happens is that your NEAT, because it makes up such an amount of how many calories you burn in a day, once those things once you stop moving your leg up and down, and you don't talk to as many people, and you're not moving around as much because your body's trying to preserve it, you're actually not burning anywhere near as many calories as you used to. So they said, so what they did was, instead of actually bringing my food down for that week, my guy basically just told me, look, you need to take that into account, that you're not moving as much. You're still exercising, you're still going to the gym, but you're not moving throughout your day to day. Because I basically got to a point where I was taking like one-on-one training sessions with people at the gym, and I had to sit down. Like, I couldn't stand next to my clients while they were exercising. I had to bring like a bench around or a ball around with me to sit down on, because I was so just tired and lethargic. And that was actually the reason why I wasn't losing weight. So I had to actively force myself to get out of that. And and it started to work again.
That's super cool. So essentially for me, I just need to chill the fuck out and get out of that fight or flight, stop burning so many calories.
Exactly.
Oh, that's
That's
cool.
what the strength coaches do. The guys who do like powerlifting and things like that, there was basically this big conception over the 90s and the early 2000s where powerlifters would essentially quit their jobs. Once they were going pro, they would basically quit their jobs, so they didn't have to move at all. So they would basically wake up, they would just eat 2 to 3 meals, go to the gym, work out, come straight back home, and then sit down, to use as little calories as possible, to get as much strength and as much weight up on them as possible. Because that's really where it was really hard for them to start gaining weight, because a lot of them usually had like labor jobs, like carpentry, doing that sort of stuff. When it was time for them to go pro, they were basically told, like, look, mate, you need to put on more weight. We can't have you like running around and doing labor jobs. We have to keep you down.
There you go. One more on the diet one, and then we'll talk about the discipline of it all, because that's often the variable where people fall down. So let's talk about meat. So I'm a big meat eater, and obviously not everyone does. People eat fish only. So, outside of the moral conversation, that's sort of not my forte. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it neutral? Does it depend on the person? What are your thoughts around meat consumption for protein?
For sure. And look, this is something that took the world by storm quite a while ago, with obviously some documentaries and things coming out on it. Look, if I'm going to go from a personal standpoint, and like you said, I'm pretty happy. We're going to keep the moral side out of this. I would argue for someone who's trying to get as much muscle as possible and they want to feel big and strong, I would argue that meat, at the very least, has to be some part of their diet. And there's a lot of options there. Like you said, I think fish, red meat, white meat, they're all very similar. But this is essentially what it's going to come down to. And this is sort of my main point on people who want to cut out red meat. It is completely possible to get big and strong on a completely vegan diet. No animal products whatsoever. It's possible, but you need to be very deliberate in what you're doing. Now, basically, there's this, when we were talking about protein, I didn't get to talk about it too much, but essentially protein is the building blocks of our body. We need it to put on muscle. What I didn't say before when we were talking about calories, but every person who is weight training should be at the very least consuming 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So for example, I'm 90 kilos. So I should be consuming 1.2 grams of that, which is roughly 135 grams of 130 grams of protein at the very minimum. So if you're say it again.
Are you aware of that sorry to cut you off, but on a daily basis, are you aware of that? Are you counting what protein?
Yeah. So for me personally, when I did my diets in the past, I was a bit of a MyFitnessPal hero. I was tracking everything, and I was making sure that my numbers of the protein and my carbs and my fats were down to the gram. It was very methodical. It was very, very on point. But for me now, what I've found is that is just not sustainable, and I don't think, unless you're, like I said, unless you're a little bit neurotic, it's probably not sustainable to track your calories and count them every single day. My advice to people is, what you want to do is actually find out, do it for a small amount of time so that you understand the foods that you enjoy and the foods that you eat on a consistent basis and what is in them, so you can start to do a little bit of simple math in your head to make sure. For example, what I do is I basically have cake and I have steak, and I know how much of those things I need to eat to get my 130 plus grams of protein. So I don't actually sit there and weigh everything out and put everything into a thing anymore, into an actual database. I only do that when I'm actually going to be stepping on stage, pretty much. So outside of that, I had to find a way to actually do this long term. So for me now, it's about, I've done enough tracking to know that 100 grams of kangaroo mint is 30 grams of protein, and I buy a kilo packet, so I divide it into basically 10 serves of mint, and then I know every time I have one of those serves, it's 30 grams of protein, or sorry, it's a little bit more, it's 34. And then same thing goes for the steak. And then I'm just sort of keeping a light tally in the head as I go. But if you're ever unsure and you've never done it before, you probably need to track it for a little while to really understand
that. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So then,
so getting back onto the meat. One of the big problems with people who go full vegan is there's something inside protein, and one of the essential amino acids that's in protein, it's called leucine. Now, leucine is actually what drives muscle protein synthesis. So muscle protein synthesis is what your body needs to be in a state of muscle protein synthesis for your body to actually synthesize protein, therefore muscle. So that is the process of your body gaining muscle. And you need inside your protein source 2 grams of leucine or more to actually signal to your brain to start muscle protein synthesis. So what happens with vegan diets is there is actually not enough leucine in their protein sources to actually stimulate muscle protein synthesis, right? Whereas in kangaroo, in any sort of meat source, whether it's chicken, steak, eggs, all of those things, that's usually not a problem. You will get 2 grams of leucine from 20 to 30 grams of protein from a meat source. However, if you're going to be getting protein from a vegan source, whether it is a pea protein or like lentils, or those things that usually people are looking at when they make the argument for vegan training, what happens is inside lentils, even if you're consuming 100 grams of lentils, there's only about 0.8 grams of leucine inside the lentils. So even though you're getting your 140, 130 grams of protein, you're not getting enough leucine to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. So you think you're doing all the right things, but if you're not supplementing with the leucine on the other side of it, you're not actually going to be getting the most out of it at all.
I see. That's super fascinating.
Yeah, that's look. Other than that, so you can buy leucine as an essential amino acid straight online, and you can buy that as just a powder. And what I recommend, and what I've seen people do it more for morally reasons or for whatever reason, when they're eating and when they consume their 20 to 30 grams of protein from whatever source that they decide, they actually supplement with a teaspoon of leucine. And so they basically just drink that while they're having their meal. And then along with the 30 grams of protein plus the supplemented leucine, it is enough to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. And then once you've done that, there's essentially the difference between meat and vegan. There's not a massive difference. So if you are taking that into account, you can be vegan and become quite strong and quite muscly. And there is a argument that it could be better for losing weight, purely for the inflammation side of things. So red meat can sometimes cause inflammation. I know there's a lot of people that don't deal with it as well as others, but yeah, I think for the most part, if we're looking at it from just purely a calorie standpoint or a physique standpoint, it can be very preferential, but if you're going to go vegan, you should look at supplementing leucine, or else when you're losing weight, you're going to be losing muscle because your body's not in muscle protein synthesis. Or if you're trying to if you're trying to lose weight, you will be taking it from muscle. And if you're trying to gain weight, you're not going to be able to because your body's not in that state of MPS, which I should call it now because I'm getting it's hard to say it over and over again.
So then if you're, whether it's the measurement of, protein on a daily basis, getting your leucine if you're vegan, if it's doing the right exercise, whatever it is, I mentioned before that the discipline's often one of the variables where people fall down.
Yep.
Is that part of what your role is as a PT, is to give the information and tailor a plan accordingly that serves their goal? But I would imagine in large part it is being that accountability source to some extent. Do you find that that's often where people fall short, is the discipline of keeping consistent? And what are some top tips that you might have for people listening that they could potentially implement to keep or maintain that discipline? Is it having only a couple of things that they focus on? Is it having an accountability buddy, so to speak? Is it connecting with a PT? What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, look, this is one of the tough ones, and to be completely honest with you, man, I think the discipline side of things is one of the things I struggle on most. Like I said, for someone who competes in natural bodybuilding, I should be tracking my meals every single day down to the gram if I want to be the absolute best. But it's hard to do that long term. Now, you would be absolutely astonished at the amount of people that come to me and they don't really want much else from me other than that discipline side of things. They just want me to be there so that they have someone to answer to. And when they eat bad or when they do whatever they do, they like having that person beside them to say, hey, you've got to get better at that, or you need to work on that, or, clip them behind the back of the ear. There is a lot of people that come with just that mentality. And I would argue that they struggle the most with results because essentially what you're doing is you're putting that blame onto someone else, right? And I'm all for it. I think everyone needs accountability, and I think having someone there to actually have to answer to is so important. But if you start to get into the headset of for example, someone who only trains with their personal trainer, that can be very problematic in the long term, because if for whatever reason you stop working together, you can become very lost, and you didn't really learn a lot of skills during that time, because if you don't have the skills to keep going and do this in your own time and keep that discipline, then I would argue that the personal trainer or the coach didn't really do their job right. So when it comes to discipline and motivation, there needs to be some sort of work. There needs to be work from your end as well. So what I like to do when I'm working with people, or someone comes to me with that sort of mentality, I end up spending a lot of time talking a little bit about the stuff that we have today, and actually making them understand the calorie side of things, making them understand what sort of training they should be doing and when they should do it, and giving them the power to make decisions. Everything else outside of that, it really comes down to a personality for example, I have people who do just online training, right? So I don't actually see them in person. Some of them I've never even met. And essentially my job for them is to write up their programs and give them, say, 4 to 5 weeks worth of training and give them their food in a little spreadsheet. And the rest of it is completely up to them. Now, what's funny is taking those people versus people that come in and see me 1, 2, 3 times a week and rely on me a lot more. Sometimes don't see as good results as the online people because they're taking the responsibility onto themselves. They don't need that one-on-one check-in every single time to just do the right thing and to do what they know they need to do. But like I said, man, it's a personality thing. It's very hard to find people who can do that. But I found that people who are able to look at a plan, go see a trainer and tell them through what you're really trying to do, and then they can spit you out a plan. And if you can understand that plan and you can do that, 80% of the time, if you can follow that plan, do the exercises and eat the food that they're telling you to 80% of the time, that's usually going to really get good results. But if you're always relying on a trainer or a workout buddy to be there with you and to essentially hold your hand throughout it, it's going to work. It's going to work short term, and you're going to feel better, and you're going to see some results. But if you're looking for long-term happiness and you're looking for long-term health, there needs to be some form of responsibility on yourself to make these things happen.
I could not agree more aggressively, Karl. So for me, and just to sort of bring it back around to the top about the mental health part of the conversation, for me, and this sort of goes into the nature versus nurture side of things. You mentioned personality there. I feel like I am, if I'm anything naturally, it's wildly undisciplined, funnily enough. So I feel like some people might say, look, I'm not disciplined or whatever. And look, I get it. And I empathize to an extent because I feel like by nature I'm wildly undisciplined. However, I feel like it becomes a lot easier when, one, you remember the reasons you're doing something. So if you want to go for a run, if you want to go to the gym or whatever, remember why you're doing it. Is it to look a certain way to impress your partner? Is it to feel good about yourself? Or is it to improve your mental health? Whatever it might be. So having those reasons front of mind makes things a bit easier as opposed to just getting up to try and tick a box, because then you're just going to fall short. And then for me, the big thing is I take real pride in doing things that I said I would do and keeping the promises I make to myself, right? And I find that cycle, and it takes, look, it's a process like anything. That's kind of the theme of this conversation. Things take time, and there is a process to improve. But for me, the more I adhere to the promises I keep to myself, whether it's going to the gym or going for a run, whatever it might be, and there's always setbacks, I find that I get this like disproportional increase in my self-esteem than other things and other practices that I sort of try and implement in my life to feel good about myself. So for people listening that maybe do struggle with discipline, and tell me if you agree, Karl, I find that the biggest factor that helps me, who's someone who is admittedly undisciplined by nature, is knowing that I am going to feel like a fucking piece of shit if I don't do something that I said I would do. And at the same token, I'm going to feel like a rock star if I did follow through on the promise I kept to myself. So I find just that thought process, I've conditioned it into my mind long enough now that it becomes more of a habit, and it makes it easier to be disciplined, so to speak. So I hope that makes some sense. A bit of a rant there, but I don't know. I've personally found it to be really valuable. Would you agree? Does that kind of make sense?
Look, man, I think that makes perfect sense. One of the things that I try and get people to do is create some rules for themselves.
Yes.
Where it's, I always, and instead of saying I won't eat this or, I'm not going to do this, it should be things like, I always train on a Wednesday, so that's it.
Yes.
That's your rule. No matter what happens throughout your day or throughout your week, I always train on a Wednesday. And like you said, man, the longer you do these and you keep making up these little streaks, the better you feel about yourself, and you start to feel this, you literally feel like you're on a roll. You feel like I could do anything because, you're just getting these little wins. And before you know it, you just feel, you feel like you can do it, and there's nothing wrong. Like I said, man, it comes down to personalities again, because, there's a lot of people that I know that like to do it all out. I'm kind of like that, whereas I can't do like a half diet, or, I can't like half do something. I'm either, I can't be bothered with it, or I'm all about it. I'm going to do everything I can to make it happen.
Yeah.
Some other people, they
It's a
need
real
that.
identity thing as well.
Absolutely. And I also know a lot of people that are like, they need to start off small. They need those little wins. They need to, they need to see like a half a kilo weight loss for the week. They need to see like that they were able to put down the chocolate when they were, and that makes them feel amazing. Even if they're not doing everything else outside of that, they put down the chocolate bar, but they still got Macca's later that day. That's, to them and to me, for them, that's still a win, because every step in that right direction is making you a better person, and it's going to make you a happier person, because you're able to tell yourself no or yes, and actually you're in control of your life. That's where people need to get to.
Do you have that in mind when you're working with clients to help them kind of have that shift in identity? So for example, I would imagine, you'd have clients that come in and potentially want to lose weight, and maybe they've been overweight for the vast majority of their life, and such that their identity is now like, hey, I'm a fat person. Whether they articulate that or not to themselves consciously, on a subconscious level, that's who they see themselves. And I feel like there's this strong sort of human need to be and act in a way that's congruent with how you see yourself, right? Who you think you are. So shifting that identity can be really hard. Is that something you're aware of? Like, whether it's that example I just gave, or it's someone that I can't put on muscle, or I'm too busy, or whatever it might be. Have you found that to be the case? And how do you go about kind of shifting that with people? Is it just a matter of like doing the right things over time? Like, how do you get it? Because I feel like that's the fucking critical key for people in any endeavor, but certainly with fitness and health and nutrition, all that stuff we're talking about is breaking or shifting, I should say, how they currently see themselves.
Absolutely. Look, I think identity is one of the biggest roles in this, because if we really bring it back down, and I keep saying it like this because this is what I do it for. When I started training, it was always to look better. It was always to look and feel better about myself. And as shallow as that sounds, it's what got me through. And then over time, I learned to love the gym. I learned to love the feeling that the gym gave me. But before any of that, I was always doing it because I was very unhappy with how I looked, how I felt, getting teased, all those things. It doesn't feel good, and it can weigh you down. And one of the things I always say to people, and because it's usually more of a problem in people trying to lose weight. It's usually a problem among people that are overweight for most of their lives, and they'll come to me and they'll say that I weigh 110 kilos right now, and I want to be 70 by the end of the year. And the main thing I ask them is like, if you, let's say, instead of going from 110 to 70, let's say we got you to 95, but you had a six pack, would you care? And 90% of the time, the answer is no. And that's because there's this disproportionate, there's a lot of weight hanging on the scales. Everyone puts their hopes and their dreams like going through the scale and a number on the scale. But what people don't understand is that the scales don't tell you a hell of a lot other than, am I losing weight or gaining weight? That's not really going to have an effect for most people on how they look. There needs to be an intrinsic feeling of you wanting to get better and actually look better. Because like I said, you can lose 10 kilos and look exactly the same, or you can lose 3 kilos and look like a completely different person. And it's because the scales aren't telling the whole story, and it's not just about the exercise and the food that you're putting into your mouth. Yes, it makes up a massive part of it, but it also comes down to, how much sleep are you getting a night? Like how well are you taking care of your personal hygiene? And these things are massive factors of mental health. So
Yes.
when it comes to people that are in this position, it's really about just talking them out of that and giving them, because sometimes, and for a lot of people, sometimes the gym and nutrition isn't really where they're going downhill. I've got people that I've worked with that, they train pretty much every day and they eat pretty healthy. I get people to send photos of the food that they're eating, so I can get an idea of, what it's doing to them. And there's some people that are doing those things really, really well, but still not getting the results they deserve and still having this negative talk to themselves. And it's about giving guidance and giving help in the other areas as well. About how to get the most amount of sleep, how to actually be happy in your home, finding out those demons and taking the time to actually try and tackle them, can sometimes mean all the difference in the world. And you can not change a thing from your training and nutrition aspect and just fix sleep, just fix your mental health, just fix, your hygiene or supplementation even, and it can just open up so many doors. So it's about not having this one pronged approach and always just thinking to people who have this bad self-talk that they're doing something wrong. I don't think that people are doing things wrong. People are just trying to live. People are just trying to get by, and you need to take a step back, look at them as a person, not just as an athlete or just as a consumer of food, and really ask yourself, like, what's the real underlying factors here that's making them talk about themselves? Whether it's coming from parents, kids, back in school days, that they're talking about themselves like this, and actually just ask them why, because a lot of the time when you talk about yourself like that, you don't usually have a very good reason to. There's always someone worse off. There's always someone better off. You are you, and you need to be happy with that before anything else changes.
Yeah, that's huge. That holistic approach, I think, is so important. And I know people listening probably relate in some capacity again, but certainly for me, I know we've spoken about this. For me, sleep's been a big issue, and I feel like I've been able to improve that over the last few months, and that's had a dramatic impact on my ability to train. And sort of this cycle again, like you get one element right, just makes that momentum breed and makes everything else a little bit easier. And I find that the good thing about the world of fitness and diet and everything we're talking about is it's a good place to start to then start improving other areas of your life. But of course, it's not the be all and end all. So it's really cool that you take that more holistic approach. You mentioned supplements there, without sort of diving into it too much, because I'll let you go pretty soon. Just have a couple more for you. But is there any sort of best practices there? I suppose it depends on what your goals are, but whether it's for weight loss or weight training, could you just maybe allude to some of the main supplements that you like to work with?
Yeah, absolutely, man. So as far as the guidelines, so it's a little bit tricky because obviously with supplements, there's a lot of them that you'll basically just pee down the toilet, if you're using them incorrectly. So I think it's usually what I like to do is when I work with someone, I usually get them to start off on like this, 5 or 6 specific supplements that just give this general health. It's basically the guidelines for general health overall. And if we can start there and then we can see what happens to you and what you feel over the coming weeks, it can start to open up more doors and tell you what you should really be doing. But for the most part, if we were to give some general recommendations for people so that they can, look into these themselves and potentially start adding them to their weight and nutrition regime at the moment, a multivitamin is the thing about multivitamins is they're a lot of the things that they put in there, you're probably not going to be able to absorb 100% anyway. But what they've shown in studies is that most of them don't cause a lot of harm either. So it's good to have in case you are deficient in one of those. So I always just recommend a multi, especially in the first couple of months of training, just to make sure that everything's on the high side. Fish oil is another one that I think most people are getting around now, and it's good to see. But especially if you're not actually eating fatty fish, like your salmon and things like that. Fish oil is super important to make sure that you are getting in your omega-3s. There are some other ways to get it, but once again, what I'm about is risk assessment. So is there a risk of taking this supplement, and is there a benefit of taking this supplement, and then working out if it's worth it for people. Once again, you can't really, unless you're being really stupid with your supplementation, it's quite hard to get adverse effects from fish oil, but it can create really good benefits if you do use it correctly, which is usually 3,000 milligrams first thing in the morning, which is usually 2 to 3 tablets. Or you can split that up as 1,500 in the morning and 1,500 at night as well. So multivitamins, fish oil. If you are strength training, one of the most researched substances and researched and safest supplements out there would have to be creatine. Creatine is basically created in our body anyway, and is used for sort of like explosive movements. And we want to have that. And if you can supplement with this, it's going to give you a lot more output. Super safe. It's basically, and not only super safe, but it's super cheap. You can get, I think it's like 100 serves for about $30, which is just incredible. Which is basically just a teaspoon. It's usually unflavored. Creatine monohydrate, if anyone from the actually goes and looks it up, is usually the best way to go. Creatine monohydrate. That's for anyone, male or female, that is strength training. I would really look at bringing that in. I would consider a whey protein shake as well for most. Some people do ask me whether it's worth it or not, and that's really going to come down to whether you are getting enough protein from your normal diet. So if you work out your calories and you do your little thing and find out I'm actually struggling to hit that 130 grams because you don't like eating that amount of those protein-rich foods, then a protein shake can be one of the easiest ways to just top that off and get you a little bit extra out of the day.
And do those whey protein shakes, do they generally have the leucine you were mentioning earlier? Do they have that 2 grams of leucine that we need from our protein source?
Yes. So whey protein will have your 2 grams of leucine very easily. However, your pea protein, which is a vegetarian option, and there's one other one that I'm blanking on at the moment, but there's 2 main vegan proteins that you can get. And those ones, you have to be careful. If they're a good brand, they'll normally have the essential amino acid content on the back of the label, and you'll be able to see it there along with the other 8 amino acids, how much leucine is in there. And what you're really looking for is 2 to 4 grams basically of leucine to make sure it's doing enough for you. So that would be the main 3. I would also look at, for most people, the problem with Australia actually is that it's some crazy percentage, between like 70 to 80% of us are actually deficient in vitamin D as well, which is one of the, because vitamin D is actually a hormone supplement. It's not actually it's not like, they call it vitamin, but it's not really a vitamin. It's more a hormonal structure inside your body. And it's just so important for so many functions of your body. So if you are deficient in vitamin D, I would look at getting that up as fast as possible and as quick as possible. It's been known to cause depression and anxiety, things you wouldn't normally expect, but it can have really, really big effects.
That's interesting. Hey, mate, I've got a couple more for you, and then I'll let you go, and I really appreciate your time here, Karl. I want to talk about form, just going back to the the types of exercise, I suppose, particularly with everyone at home right now. They haven't got the luxury of working with an expert like yourself, and there's every chance they could fuck it up and hurt themselves. So particularly if they're weight training and they're trying to put on size, but even if it's a matter of like a HIIT workout, for example. I just put one on the other day from a YouTube video, and I feel like I've just cooked my neck from trying to perform from what the hot chick was doing in the video. So form obviously plays a huge role. And the point I want to make is, as a result of, that workout for me personally the other day, I was going to work out today, but I'm not, because I'm so sore and my head feels a bit funny, and I must have done something wrong. So how important is having the right form versus, how important is it to get the form correct before you worry about, smashing out as much as you possibly can?
Yeah, absolutely. So look, when it comes to form, I'm a little bit of a funny one. Purely, not actually, that's a lie. I really like, doing exercises correctly, but sometimes what you need to ask yourself before you actually perform the exercise is, what am I trying to work? What am I actually trying to do here? And that is going to really determine on how you should perform that movement. For example, if you're doing a HIIT class that you see online, obviously the main goal there isn't to build as much muscle as possible. So maybe the form is going to be a little bit faster, a little bit more intense to actually get your sweat up and get the effects that you're actually looking for. Then if you're looking to maximize muscle, then you're looking at so instead of doing fast push-ups and getting them done quickly, you could be looking at a bench press with, real slow technique and good form and, lowering the rep ranges and things like that. But you need to understand what it is you're trying to achieve from that. Now, obviously now it's going to get a little bit funny, and form, it's a hard one because, who's to say one form is correct and one's the other, especially when some people now will be using other forms of body weight. They might be using dog camps for equipment and for weights and things like that. So it's going to be really hard to determine that. But one of the main tips I would give to people is, if they're unsure about the form or doing it right, is to take a second to really slow down the tempo. And by what I mean the tempo, let's say we're doing a push-up, right? I would try and do really, really slow drops. So basically doing a 3 to 5 second drop, eccentric drop from push-up, arms fully stretched out, to dropping yourself to the ground, and try and take about 5 seconds to do this, and then about 5 seconds to come back up. What you're going to find is, after doing 1 to 2 to 3 reps of this, is, where am I feeling the pain start to come on? Where am I starting to feel the fatigue? Now, if that's not in the areas that they should be, then that's when form could potentially be an issue, and you might need to look a little bit further into it. Because it's so nuanced, man. Like, when you're doing an exercise, sometimes just a slight shift in the arch of the back, sometimes just a slight push out or slight wing of the elbow can completely change what's working and whether it's safe or not safe. But what I would tell people is that, as long as usually form isn't where people get injured. Usually where people get injured is the range of motion. For example, if someone's doing a bench press with 2 dumbbells and they let their elbows come all the way down, they bring it down so that the dumbbells are basically touching their chest, keep their elbows really close to the body, and they bring it down really sharply. That, even though you're looking at it, the form isn't 100%. Where the injury tends to happen is because they've put muscles that they weren't meant to be working in a place that's further than their preferred range of motion. And then that's when you get pulls and strains and torn ligaments and things like that, because you're going past that range of motion. So what I would argue is that when you're learning a new exercise, or you're not 100% sure about it and you haven't really sussed it out, is to shorten the range of motion. So for example, if you're doing, let's say you've never done a push-up before in your life, it's very unlikely you're going to be able to go hand shoulder width apart and push your elbows out wide and get your chest to touch the ground, right? So you shouldn't try that first go, because your body's going to have to compensate to make that happen. And then when the compensation starts is when the injury starts. So you only start by, bending your elbows to about maybe 45 degrees, if that, and just doing smaller range of motion reps, but doing more of them to work out whether it's working correctly, and then gradually decrease that or increase that range of motion so that you can get lower and lower. It's just like we were talking about before, progression is everything in this game. You really want to be progressing, but that doesn't always mean more weight on the bar. It doesn't always mean, eating less calories or more calories. Sometimes it can just be as simple as, can I do this exercise better than before? Do I feel it more in the muscles that are meant to be working than before? That is just as much progression. And if I could possibly argue that it's going to be even more effective in getting you a better body, because you're going to be able to move better. You're going to be able to add more exercises to your repertoire. And yeah, long term, it's going to make a world of difference.
Mate, I'm grinning from ear to ear. That's exactly what I want to hear. That is super helpful. And it's, again, I'm sort of speaking for myself personally, and I just hope that people can relate and get some value. I find that's where I often fall down, is whether it is the range of motion's not quite right, or, I'm sort of, I'm compensating because I'm trying to lift too much weight, or whatever it might be. And that it sort of stops the progress because I end up getting injured and slow down and all that sort of stuff. So what you just explained, I think, is really important. Mate, I've got one more before we sign off, and I said it a couple of times, but I really appreciate you carving out the time to connect and come on the show for a chat. Tons and tons of value in there. We've covered a lot. So the way I want to wrap things up is this: for people listening, what is the best place to start? I want to break it into two kind of categories, I suppose. So someone's listening and they currently do fuck all. They don't they don't really exercise a whole lot, and then nutrition's not quite right. Without overwhelming them, because they can't do everything at once. I think that's where people fall down as well, is trying to do too much. I think you mentioned analysis paralysis earlier. What maybe one or two things that they should start doing essentially today, that's going to get them in the right direction?
Yeah, awesome, mate. So there's basically two main things that I would introduce to someone who hasn't really started and wants to do it for the first time and do it right. You definitely don't want to just go straight into it. I would really just start focusing on, when it comes to food, is protein, right? So you need more protein in the diet. That means a good way that I like to do this, especially when I'm trying to teach someone, is to always have a protein source with every meal that you eat, especially in the early stages, because it'll start to get you a little bit more aware of what protein sources are, like, what things you actually enjoy. It's going to make you experiment a little bit, and it's going to get you a little bit more consistent. Not necessarily saying that you have to do that for the rest of your training career or the rest of your life, but you definitely want to increase the protein up, learn about it, find ways to make it work for you inside your lifestyle, so you can get the amount that you need. And there's many calculators to find that out. And as far as, if someone is just sitting on their ass and they're doing absolutely nothing, um, which I think a lot of us might be at the moment, I can't stress how important just walking and getting your daily steps in is. You know, what happens to a lot of people, especially when you get sedentary jobs, is it makes you feel lazy. It makes you not want to move as much, and it actually makes you more tired, even though you're sitting down more, which makes no sense. But um, it's really hard to get out there and achieve the steps that you should maintain. Now, it's not necessarily 10,000, but I think deliberate walking. One of the guys that I really love, Stan Efferding, he does a lot of stuff on this, and he proposes something called 10-minute walks, which basically after each meal, your breakfast, your lunch, and your dinner, you take a 10-minute walk. And studies have shown that to be just as effective as blood pressure medication pills. Not saying that you should stop them, but bringing this practice in and starting to walk would be so beneficial to your life. I don't do it every single time, but it definitely helps when you do it, especially after a quite big a meal. It brings your blood sugar down real quick, less bloating, much better to sleep, especially after dinner. Going to bed on a full stomach can really impact your sleep. But walking and protein for someone just to completely start off fresh. There's so much more into it, but if you do these things, and I guess the last thing I'd put in there is research. Start to listen to podcasts or read articles or do whatever you need to do. The knowledge you can learn online is just unfathomable. You should really, really utilize that and learn, because there's just so many people out there willing to give out free advice. For you just to get better at training, at your diet, at your nutrition. And you should have a look. There's always some bad stuff out there, but if you watch enough of it, you're going to see the contradicting and you get to make your own, because there is some right and wrong answers, but I think it's more backed by science and things that aren't backed by science. And I would say yet. But yeah, that's where I would start for them. And as far as someone who is actually a little bit more advanced, so let's say, for example, they've been training for about 12 months in their field, whether it's weightlifting, running, swimming, doing whatever you're doing, and you think you can do more, but you're kind of stuck there. If you're in that position, what you need to find out is, are you actually getting closer to your goal? Are you actually progressing still? Um, at the end of the day, that is really all we're searching for. If you are in that position, you're just looking to be better. So how you need to know if you are getting better and by how much you're getting better. The more data points you start to track, and I see this commonly across people that I work with and people that are coaches, is the more data points you track in your health and fitness, the more likely you're going to succeed and the more likely you're going to actually get the body and the physique and the results that you're after. Your weight, you should be tracking your personal bests, whether it's, how much you can lift or how many reps you can get of a certain weight of your favorite exercise. And more things you track, it collates, and then you start to see the trends, and that's when you're in control. When you know how your body reacts to something and how it feels and how you feel, when you bring things in, take things out, start a different exercise split, change your diet, and you can actually relate and turn these things into data for yourself, you will go above and beyond, and you'll be able to do amazing things with your health and fitness. You'll be able to get with the body that you're after. You're not going to really struggle there. So I would just encourage people that are really in that position is to track more food, more personal bests. And then from there, you can start to build and just improve on the things that you want to improve on. It sounds simple, but you'd be amazed at how many people don't do it in the gym. That you need to, unless, now this is where it sort of gets hard, because some people that are in that position, they want more, but you also need to understand that more, better results and, more chiseled abs requires more effort and more work. And that comes into, tracking more diligently and, being able to take all that data and look at it and actually make it a big priority in your life. If you can't make it a big priority in your life, then, you should be happy with what you've achieved thus far. And, I would really encourage people to actually try and look deeper into their data, whether you have a fitness tracker like Fitbit or anything like that. Start to actually take into account all the little data points, how well you sleep, even. If you can do that, I think it's going to be a lot better for you specifically to actually get a better body.
I love it. Karl, where can people connect with you? I forgot to mention at the top, but you're based in the northern suburbs from memory. So how do people connect with you if they want to either train with you, and obviously it's legal to do so, or if they want to get more tips, follow your journey, whatever? How do they connect with you?
Thanks so much, man. So on Instagram, albeit I'm not as as constant and as active on there at the moment as I have been in the past. But usually I try and offer out a lot of free infographics, a lot of help. Always super happy to get people on my Instagram, which is Coach KZPT. But if you're looking just to inquire or to learn a little bit more about me, I also have a podcast as well, which I'm hoping to chuck this one on there because I think we've covered a lot of good stuff. You can find that at kzptcoaching.com. Those are pretty much the main two places that I'd like to connect. And yeah, if anyone has any questions or, just wants to just ask a little bit more about there specifically, because that is the hard thing with just fitness and achieving a physique that you're proud of, is that it's a purely individual thing. Even though sometimes the rules tend to look the same for most, that's not the case. You need to know what's right for you. And, I'm basically dedicating my life to help people find how to do that.
I think that's pretty clear, mate. Came through in our chat today and our chats that we've had offline as well. So appreciate you coming on. I learned heaps, and some people listening did. And mate, I'm sure I'll get you on another time to dive into some more stuff. Because like you touched on a couple of times, it is pretty nuanced with conversation, but there's heaps and heaps of stuff in this conversation we've just had that people can work with. So, mate, you're a good man, and we'll stay connected for sure.
Thank you so much, man. It's been an absolute pleasure. Hopefully they got some stuff out of this.
Thanks again for listening to this episode. If you did enjoy it, if you got some sort of value from the episode, please do us a favor and subscribe to the channel. We've got lots more to come, and share it with your friends and family. It all helps our mission of raising $1 million towards brain injury recovery and research. So please share the podcast, and I look forward to sharing more with you on another episode.